The nomenclature of red oil paints can be genuinely perplexing. Vermilion, madder, scarlet, naphthol, these aren't simply marketing terms. Each designation carries specific technical implications, and understanding this distinction is essential for serious work. In this demonstration, I'll examine the historical pigments favored by European old masters alongside modern alternatives that address the limitation of traditional materials, namely poor light fastness, toxicity, and availability. I will apply 12 red paints to evaluate their opacity and tinting characteristics when mixed with white. Oil paints consist of pigments, microscopic insoluble particles, suspended in drying oils such as linseed, walnut, or poppy oil. It's worth distinguishing these from soluble dyes, which require a laking process for painting applications. Laked pigments involve precipitating organic dyes into inorganic substrates, typically aluminium hydroxide. The dye molecules become permanently bound within this matrix, rendering them effectively insoluble and providing some protection from environmental degradation. During the Renaissance and Dutch Golden Age, the following pigments formed the backbone of the red palette. Red lead is highly toxic and primarily medieval in usage. In oil painting it can only be used in underpainting layers, and it darkens over time, so I mention it merely for historical completeness. Red ochre represents one of humanity's oldest pigments, an earthy brownish red. It can be natural red iron oxide, designated PR102, or burnt yellow ochre PY43. Related variants include Venetian red, English red, and Indian red, all chemically identical as PR102. Vermilion typically presents a brilliant red with orange undertones, though darker variants exist. The original pigment was made from cinnabar, a mercury sulfide mineral that was heated and ground. Later, alchemists synthesized it by combining mercury and sulfur. Vermilion is opaque and has very good permanence, also it's considered unreliable by many artists. The darkening observed in some specimens has been attributed to impurities in the red process manufacturing, which may cause instability in the red form of mercuric sulfide. Madder red and carmine red constitute the primary laked pigments used historically. Madder derives from madder root, while carmine comes from cochineal insects or Brazil wood. These transparent colors were ideal for glazing techniques during the Renaissance and later, but both suffer from poor light fastness. Given the inherent problems with historical pigments, toxicity in lead and mercury compounds, fugitive colors in the lakes, contemporary manufacturers predominantly use modern synthetic pigments that offer superior performance. Alizarin represents the first synthetic version of the madder dye produced synthetically since the mid-19th century. However, PR83 is known to fade when exposed to UV light, especially in dilute washes or tints, and has become a benchmark for testing light fastness in its reliable fading. Most major brands now use PR177 anthracite red as a more stable pigment, so even this shows some fading in extended testing. Cadmium red is a preeminent modern red pigment. These paints are highly opaque, generally light-fast, and available in various shades from light to deep. The light to medium values serve excellently as vermilion replacements, so cadmium compounds remain toxic and require proper handling. Historical red ochres remain available in high quality, so most contemporary versions use synthetic iron oxide, PR101 instead of PR102, in various formulations from opaque to transparent. Industrial pigments including naphthalene, quinacridone and pearl compounds provide additional options. I personally employ these as substitutes for historical pigments in my own work. Now let me show you 12 paints I have assembled for direct comparison. We will examine each paint and I will explain how I use these modern materials to replace the historical pigments. These paints are Red Ochre, Indian Red, Vermilion Hue, Scarlet Lake, Scheveningen Red Light, Cadmium Red Light, Madder Light, Madder Ruby, Madder Deep, Rose Lake, Magenta, and Cadmium Red Deep. This red ochre from Old Holland is essentially the same one that the old masters used. It's a brownish red color that I like to use for skin tone mixtures. The paint is very opaque, so you should be restrained when using it in glazing mixtures. The pigment is PR102. For the modern iron oxide paints I've chosen an Indian red from Old Holland here, which is slightly cooler than Venetian red. I like to use it in shadows of red textiles, for example. The pigment is in synthetic PR101. This paint is called Vermilion and it's from the Mamiro Pool line. It shows the color tone of a light classic vermilion very nicely. However, unlike genuine vermilion, it is transparent. I like to use this paint in skin tones, especially when I want to maintain glazing capability. The pigment is a modern Naphthalene Scarlet PR188. Here is a Scarlet Lake from Old Holland. Please notice, Scarlet is a color designation and not a pigment designation. This orange is very similar in tone to vermilion, and I use it just like the vermilion from my Mary. The pigments are PR209, quinacridone red, and PR168, anthraquinone scarlet. Now a PR112 naphthalene red from Old Holland, which is called Scheveningen Red Light. It's supposed to be opaque, which I find exaggerated. I don't use this paint and have only included it here to show a naphthalene red. Apart from the lower price and non-toxicity, I see no advantages over a cadmium color for my purposes. The next pigment is a cadmium red light from my Mary Pool line. I chose it because it has a very beautiful vermilion tone and can be used as an opaque red like vermilion. It's excellent for old master techniques to be glazed with transparent reds like Madder Lake. The pigment is cadmium red PR108. Now to the modern alternatives to the classic transparent red paints and lakes. First, a Madder Light from Schminke Norma. This is a fairly warm version of Madder Red with an orange undertone. It's excellent for glazing. The pigment is PR207 quinacridone Scarlet. Next is also from Schminke Norma, but a cooler Madder Red version called Madder Ruby. It's a classic replacement for Madder Red Lake. The pigment is called PR264 Pyrrole Red Deep. What's nice to see here is how these matters compare to the next color, because it's a genuine Alizarin from Old Holland with the name Madder Crimson Deep. The pigment is PR83-1. And here's a quick comparison to an Alizarin substitution from Old Holland, which is called Alizarin Lake. It consists of a pigment mixture including PR177 and anthraquinone red. As you can see, the slightly muted color tone of Alizarin is well matched. Next, two quinacridone pigments. First, a Rose Lake from Blocks. It's a classic carmine tone and a good modern replacement for the Blood of Lies. The pigment is beautifully transparent, has a slightly violet undertone, and I use this color in many ways, including in skin tones, especially because it's highly pigmented. The pigment is PV19 quinacridone violet, so a pigment that's counted among the violet pigments. Then a classic magenta from Old Holland from the pigment PR122 quinacridone magenta. It's very color strong, very cool, and I personally use it very rarely, and then only for accents in mixtures. As the last paint I've chosen a Cadmium Red PR108 again, here a Cadmium Red Deep from Old Holland. It's typically opaque for cadmium, and you can clearly see how, despite its cool nuance, this color lacks the shimmering depth of the transparent madder and carmine tones. I use it very rarely. For me personally, it's important to know how the various pigments and paints behave when mixed with white. For this color chart, I used Gamblin Flake White Replacement, a titanium white pigment. The mixture becomes somewhat more pastel colored than with genuine lead white, but you can recognize the nuance well. Most mixtures of red paints with white create a true pink tone, which varies gently from warm to cool. The red ochre produces an orange-red medium brown tone. This is also the reason why I often prefer this red ochre over yellow ochre in skin tone mixtures, as there are enough orange undertones here. The Indian red with a slightly violet undertone produces a beautiful brown-pink tone, good for cool midtones. The Vermilion from the PR188 pigment produces a distinctly warm and orange-red pink tone. Let me show you a white mixture with some genuine Vermilion PR106. You can see that the genuine Vermilion with orange nuance from Holbein also shows a similar pink. And here's the difference to the Scarlet Lake from Old Holland, which shows a cooler pink tone. The PR112 Natural Red, which is also somewhat darker, has an even cooler pink tone. Interesting is the next paint, the Cadmium Red Light from my Mary Poo line, which has a significantly higher tinting strength compared to the Natural Vermilion, but shows a very similar warm mix with white, a great substitute for an opaque Vermilion. Now comes the transparent madder and carmine hues, and already with the warmest tone, the madder light, the cool undertone in the pink is clearly recognizable. The next three madder lakes show a pink that you classically expect from this pigment, so I like the slightly muted deeper tone of genuine Alizarin best. With Chronos redrawn violet, it becomes clear why this pigment was perhaps assigned to the violet color spectrum. And finally, the Cadmium Red Deep. It appears muted with almost a slight brown cast of Indian red. For me, it's not a replacement for Alizarin, not even in opaque mixtures. I hope I was able to shed some light on the jungle of red paints and not confuse you even more. In summary, for my personal use, I can say the following. When I work with old masters techniques, meaning in layers with the transparent and semi-transparent glazes, these red paints has proven important for me. Red ochre, scarlet red tones and light cadmium red as a replacement for vermilion, alizarin or alizarin replacement for the transparent madder tones, and quinacridone for a carmine hue with cool undertones. So, thanks for watching. Feel free to leave questions in the comments and write also about which colors and pigments you use as replacements for the historical red pigments of the old masters.